Good evening, everyone. So, I wanted to take this time to once again kind of go over a different perspective that I have during this current situation with Ukraine and Russia and dealing with the Black people, the African immigrants, and some of the African immigrant citizens that reside there in Ukraine as well as Poland. And as they're trying to essentially evacuate the country because the opposing force of the Russian Federation military coming in on the capital city, where a lot of the African immigrants are essentially going to school, studying, working, etc. Before I get into that, there's one thing I do want to cover. This being the last day of Black History, not necessarily saying that I celebrate it. I won't say that per se, because every day is Black History for me. Okay, but what I want to kind of get into is, for those of us that celebrate Black History only for this 1 month, and we look to certain Black sources like Essence Magazine, this is what I see. On the last day of Black History, I think this came out 3 or 4 days ago. This is what I see on the front cover of Essence Magazine. Now, essentially, what they're stating is that this is the first time that a LGBT couple has been on the front of Essence Magazine. I'm not anti-LGBT, but I would think that in Black History Month, we'll be showing some of our most prominent figures in Black American history, or even current day, some of the innovations, some of the interventions, some of the headways that we've made as a race. But no, we get gender. We get an agenda being pushed on us every single day that we're here in this United States of America. It really toys with me, because I truly understand the ploy of media and the government to essentially divide a people that's already divided. And when I look at this, out of all the things we could have put on the front cover of Essence during Black History Month, we put a B-list actress with her girlfriend / wife pushing an LGBT narrative, an LGBT perspective onto Black culture. Because essentially everywhere I look, this is what I see. And again, I must say I'm not anti-LGBT at all. I'm not anti-Black women. I have a Black wife. I love my Black wife. But while we're dealing with sexuality during Black History Month, where we're showing the best of us, and I'm not alluding to the fact that this is a picture of the worst of us. I'm not saying that. But the question is, what is the agenda here? What accolades has she done for Black people? What narrative, what barriers has she broken for Black people? What has she done so prominent to put her on the front page for Black History Month? The only thing I see is a lesbian couple. I'm just asking questions here. So don't take this out of, essentially the context and what I'm stating in. I'm just asking a question. So first and foremost, I had to look up who owns Essence Magazine. And we'll get back on topic, family. I just want to cover this very quickly. Who owns Essence Magazine? So just like BET, I thought maybe Jews or the Asians came in and essentially bought up Essence Magazine, and they're pushing this LGBT agenda onto Black people here in America. Even though Essence Magazine is influential around the world, but I'm staying home for a moment here. And so I looked it up and I was like, well, no, I know who this guy is. I thought he sold the company. So for you guys who are not familiar with Mr. Dennis, Mr. Dennis is a black man from Liberia. And for you guys who want a better picture of him, family, I don't know what's going on here. I really don't know what's going on here when we're not stating the obvious and we're not pushing back against these things. And with that being said, I truly digress. I truly digress. Good evening, Jermaine Anderson and Prime X. A lot of us are blinded because, see, I don't care what people do in their personal lives and with their own sexuality. I had a chance to look up the identifying sexualities, because it's daunting to me, right? Because at a moment in life when I guess we didn't evolve as a race, or when we didn't evolve as a people, there was this gay and straight, right? So I looked up these genders, and one says there's 7, one says there's 9. Let's just go with this website that says there's 9 for you guys can see what I saw. And I was just totally blown away. And I didn't see all the ones I've ever saw. We're not going to read what they as essentially mean. I'm just giving you context what I'm talking about. It can be very confusing, right? There was a time where you could allow your teenage daughter, your teenage son to actually read Essence and Ebony magazine. And remember Jet magazine? I always used to look at the Jet Beauty. But let's go through them very quickly. So first, I didn't see non-binary. Okay, maybe they have another name because a lot of times they have double names for the same terminology and identification. So agender, bigender, cisgender, gender expression, gender fluid, gender queer, intersex, gender variant, mix or MX, meaning Mr., Miss, etc., meaning gender neutral, third gender, transgender, two-spirit, and here are some alternate pronouns. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is truly where I get confused. This is involving, I'm a loss for words. Because I would think that during Black History Month, where essentially other people who are non-Black may pay attention to some of the things that are coming out of Black America, you know, highlighting our scientists, our researchers, our doctors, our lawyers, our inventors, our innovators, our civil rights leaders. We have so much culture in Black America. We have so much history in Black America, but you put 2 lesbian Black females on the cover of Essence magazine to be showcased in the last week of Black History Month. In my opinion, this is total disgrace. And I must put the disclaimer out once again. I am not anti-LGBT. I can care less of what you do with your sexuality. But then again, I must call this out as an agenda-based degrading platform to Black people in general because it doesn't showcase our greatness. This is showcasing sexuality and your choice of the person you want to be with. I see we got Mitchell Liggins in the room and we got Drico. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Now, with that being said, let's go to something lighter, I guess. Let's go to the, Ukraine/Russia conflict. And we won't really get into why Russia is attacking Ukraine. We all going to have our different perspective. If you've been watching the news, any news platform, everyone has a different idea, a different perspective, a different narrative, a different reason why Russia is attacking Ukraine. Well, family, I can sum this up in 2 words: white supremacy. Then some of you say, oh, that's white on white crime. Why should we care about it? We shouldn't. But here's the thing. If you look at the thumbnail, this is why Black people, African people should stay in their Black countries. Now, granted, I understand that a lot of African and Caribbean immigrants come to the West for better education, better facilities, better infrastructure, better everything. But don't forget, in the West, the system of white supremacy reigns supreme. And this is why Black Americans try to fight against and call out white supremacy at every case. We've been trying to warn you guys for the last 60 years of how these racist, anti-Black system do Black people around the world. See, if you believe that you're not Black, if you believe that your melanation will get through because you are from Somalia or Ethiopia or Kenya or Nigeria or Ghana, South Africa, in a white supremacy world, they don't care, especially when you go to one of the white supremacy countries. And let me name off some of the white supremacy countries. All of them. All of them. And this is why, if you notice, a lot of foundational Black Americans who are not, quote unquote, being divisive is informing immigrants to stay in their countries and build back up their countries, because you won't experience this explicit racism and this anti-Black African immigrant when you're in your own countries building them up. See, I don't just have rhetoric to give you, I have solutions. I don't understand why African countries do not call out to Black Americans and people in African descendant people who are in the UK who have been trained that and have skills and certification that can bring back to the African continent and start businesses, and you can homegrown and teach your own people right there in your own country. Because if you notice, a lot of African government officials, when they become ill and they become sick, they don't even go to their own hospitals. They get flown to Europe and America. Because your infrastructures are not intact. You guys don't have certain medical training. And this is this whole African diaspora war, African immigrants against foundational Black Americans and descendant of American slaves. We've been trying to warn you guys about white supremacy for a very long time. And I understand that you guys were colonized and you have the white supremacy ideology. You have the white supremacy mindset. Not only did they steal your land, sell and exchanged and put your people into bondage, and that's how Black Americans arrived, but they also have colonized your mind and your country and put intercontinental lines in between a country and a continent that had none. You just had kingdoms. We've been trying to warn you. And this is why you should stay in your African Black countries and build from the ground up. Because I can tell you, this whole pan-Africanism movement will go a lot differently if you say, hey, Black Americans, Black British, Black UK, can you come over and teach us the skills which you have learned in the Western world? Because we've been colonized and they have kept us from learning and advancing and innovating in our own country. Now we've gained our independence. Now we gained our freedom. Now we want to partner with you guys and build up. And I know what you're going to say. It's the government. Now, maybe I'm naive. I believe that if you guys act in unison, you act as one. I don't believe that the government would kill all of its citizens or a mass majority of the citizens. I believe that if 25% of you got on code with each other, I'd be damned if government officials will kill 25% of their country's population. And I know what some of you are going to say. In the early 90s of tribalism, what happened in Rwanda, over a million people was slaughtered and massacred in 100 days. So that's like almost what, 100,000 people a day? No, excuse me, 10,000 people a day. So I understand. But in order to change a country, there have to be some sort of rebellion. There have to be some sort of revolt. And it doesn't have to deal with you trying to overthrow your government. I'm not stating that. I'm stating that there has to be some sort of movement in unison of you guys being on code with the same one agenda. And that's African and Black empowerment in your own countries. Because this is a solution. This is a strategic move that you guys could have used 50 years ago. That way, your African citizens wouldn't try to go across the entire Western globe just to experience racism. Just to experience racism. Fair use, fair use.
Multiple times over these past 3 days, and they burnt down one of the universities.
And have you not been able to find a way to leave Ukraine to go to a neighboring country? What's the transport situation out of the country like?
In Sumi, it's not really possible because the trains are not coming through here. The train station has been closed.
It really doesn't matter where the African immigrants are from, whether it be from South Africa
that's capable
or Nigeria. It's occurring all across Ukraine and on the borders of Poland. Now, supposedly there's some border points in Poland that are actually letting African immigrants in, but of course, you guys are not hearing those stories. But nonetheless, majority of them are not letting them in. Now that this news is worldwide, they're probably now letting them in. They're probably now letting them in. But let's see what's really going on, family. Let's look at this.
They're not letting the black girl go. They're not letting the black girl go. They're not letting the black girl go.
There have been an uproar after details emerged that Black Africans in Ukraine are being denied entry into trains that are supposed to ship them away from Ukraine to neighboring countries. And the fact that there are no air travel, the only way out of Ukraine is to connect to any neighboring country to the west, and then, of course, take your plane back to your home country. So the only mode of transport left are the trains that connect Ukraine to neighboring countries like Poland. But Africans are being denied entry into those trains. Away from the trains, even those Africans who are lucky enough to
now see, I would like to believe, family, that some of the Africans that are in the Ukraine are actually African Ukrainian. I would like to believe that. But see, you don't have the skin tone to get you a pass on a train or bus. You don't have the skin tone. You're not lacking the melanation in order to board these transportation to get out of the country so you can survive. And I understand, believe me, I'm not naive to the fact that a lot of African people travel to the West for education and better opportunities. I got that. But this is one of the things that Foundational Black Americans have been talking about for a very long time, that if we actually had pan-Africanism, this right here would never occur, because you will love to stay in your countries because your infrastructure will be intact. Your schools will be on the same level as the Western world or even more advanced. So I say to you, stay in your African countries and build them up. Because this is what I said last night, and I'm going to stick by this. Now, Currently, I have no plans of ever moving from these United States of white supremacy. I don't. But if me and my family decided to move to another country, I am not going to move to another white supremacy country that I am the minority in. I am going to move to the Caribbean. I am going to move to one of the countries in Africa where people look like me. Why would I want to go to the same countries that colonized the continent, that stole art, jewels and gems, gold and silver, platinum and palladium, and resources? Why would I want to go to one of those countries? You think all of a sudden, because they gave you your independence, that all of a sudden there's no more African hate, there's no more African colonization, there's no more African racism? I want to say this too, because I think this is important to state. Have you guys ever thought about the reason why they are not letting African immigrants on buses and trains? I'm going there, family. Hold on to your seat. Have you ever thought the reason why they're not letting African immigrants on planes and trains is because they're not citizens? They could be over there on a work visa. They could be over there on a school visa. But have you ever thought that the Ukrainians said to themselves, we're going to allow our citizens safe transportation to the neighboring European countries first than everyone else? Have you ever thought about that? And again, with one exception, I do believe maybe less than 1,000, there are some African Ukrainians who actually have citizenship, so who are actually citizens of Ukraine. I have not heard that yet, but I'm pretty sure there's a couple of out there who decided to stay in Ukraine. And some of you may say, well, you know, Ukraine is one of those skinhead, neo-Nazi white supremacy countries. All of them are. You just have soft racism and hard racism. I mean, it's still racism. It's still discrimination. It's still bias. Your life is still in danger. See, there's something in me that when I look at people that look like me, I feel for them. I really do. I feel for them. When I'm seeing young kids and babies not being able to flee a country that is now in war. And then I start thinking about historical points in life where this would never take place if pan-Africanism actually worked or actually was a real thing. W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of these were part of the Pan-African movement. But Pan-Africanism has been one-sided. And so now, descendant of American slaves, foundational Black Americans, ADOS, etc., American Indians who are melanated, they're now pushing back against the Pan-Africanism movement. Then, granted, there's still a lot of people who believe in the movement of Pan-Africanism, but it is still one-sided. And I know what you're going to say, my African brothers and sisters in the continent, in the Caribbean. You're going to say your government. Did we not learn anything from Haiti when the Haitians came over here to flee their country? You see what Joe Biden did, right? He shut the door. And see, in all this talk, No one is paying attention how America is actually bombing Somalia. See, I've been on these clubhouse streets, I've been on these fan base streets, and I'm seeing a lot of divisive talk between Black Americans and people from the continent. And there's very few conversations I would say that was constructive, that was solution based. I've actually heard Somalians and Ethiopian call Black Americans monkeys and the N-word repeatedly. And granted, I've heard some Black Americans say some real ill things about Africans as well, especially in those two countries. Because I've heard Ethiopians and Somalians state that they're not Black. Okay. I just have a lot on my mind, family, and I'm trying to get my thoughts together here because this is an important conversation. Because I don't want this to happen to our descended family from across the lake, from across the pond, from across the ocean. I don't want this to happen, but it is what it is. And you guys keep leaving your countries thinking, and there is better opportunities in the West. Now, when you come over to the West, whether it be America or Europe, understand you're now in the extreme states of white supremacy. Now, even though white supremacy is worldwide, at least you are in charge of your own countries, at least. And I'm not saying that white supremacy is not pulling the strings of your government. I'm not saying that. But you won't experience this. Not being afforded the same humanitarian rights because of your skin color. See, Black Americans, we know we're the most hated in the world. We know this. You know how many times people have called out to the United Nations to state the crimes against humanity for melanated people right here in America? And they have closed the door. They have totally ignored our cries. The same white media that you have been listening to in your countries and have been leaving the stereotypical 1% of our population that we are a bunch of thugs and hoodlums and we're uneducated and we're stupid and we're lazy is the same white media that's exploiting you. It's the same white media when they're doing these interviews are stating that Europeans are blonde-haired, blue-eyed white people. And these are the countries that you guys come to. And use whatever terminology you want. Leave, flee, leaving for opportunity. It really doesn't matter. But the point is that Black Americans, a large percent of us stayed here right in America. There was a few of us really doing the pan-African movement early on, went back to Africa. But most of us stayed here because our descendants really have no history of ever being in Africa. Did you guys know that? Only around 3 to 5% of the slaves, or excuse me, of the enslaved Africans that was taken from Africa actually came to America. Majority of them went to Brazil. Over 5 million of them went to Brazil. American Indians who are highly melanated been on this land for hundreds of years. But I know there's a lot of people trying to debunk and throw out that information. A lot of people are still trying to debunk the term Black and how the Black Laws Dictionary actually deemed the term Black meaning dead at law. And that's why even Barack Obama did not consider himself Black. Have you guys been following this? Let me read some of your notes here, because this is so dire that we get through to our Caribbean and African brothers and sisters. So we're not at war with you guys. Yeah, I know there's been various of conversations that have been very divisive, might seem as though they're hateful. But this is what we've been warning you for the past 50 to 60 years of what's occurring in the West. And if you notice, whether it be Black Americans moving to Europe, Black Americans moving to Greenland and Iceland, they still have been experiencing racism. It doesn't matter where we go. When we're the minority in one of these Western white countries with anti-Black racism, you will experience racism. I did a broadcast on who killed the Haitian president. I think you guys are really, I broke that down and gave you evidence of what I believe occurred there. Prime X says confusion and division is a plan. That's how I see it. Focus is, excuse me, Focus said only a few of us have that killmonger spirit. Indeed, that's absolutely correct, my brother. Drico says Black immigrants paid more than anyone else to become a citizen. $16,000. My mom was deported when I was a child. China already got their foot in Africa. I don't know. Africans don't even have control. Good evening, Brent C. Instead of showing you a bunch of videos, and I hate this showing titles and headlines, but for the sake of time, family, we're just going to look at some titles and headlines here very quickly on YouTube. Uproar after Africans face discrimination on Ukraine-Poland border, meaning that the Polish are not letting a lot of the African immigrants come in. Russia, Ukraine, South Africans stuck in the Ukraine urged to seek refuge in Poland. Black Africans escaping war in Ukraine denied entry into Poland. What it is to be Black in Poland. Come on. Ukraine, Nigerians stranded, unable to enter Poland. Shocking videos of Africans fleeing the Ukraine war being refused entry to Poland. So think about this. How terrifying is this? It really doesn't matter what African country you're from. How terrifying is this? You went to the West for better opportunities, better education, a better way of living. You went to the West. You went to Ukraine. You went to Poland, whatever. But now you're trying to leave that country because war ensues with the oncoming Russian Federation army bombing the capital city and in neighboring other cities. And you're trying to leave with your family. You have your wife, you have your husband, you have your kids, and maybe you're a student. The Ukrainians won't allow you to use transportation, the buses and trains to leave into Poland. So you say, okay, well, we'll have to walk. Oh, it's 50 miles to the border, but you begin to walk because they won't allow you to use the transportation. And then when you finally make it to the border, they won't even let you leave the damn country either. The Polish won't even let you inside the country. That's like a racist sandwich. You got racism on this side, and you got racism on that side. You got racism on the Ukraine side. You got racism on the Polish side. It really doesn't matter. Now, I wouldn't want this to happen to any of my African brothers and sisters, but it's happening. And all this divisive talk that we have going back and forth, maybe this is what essentially needs to happen to really have true pan-Africanism in the African diaspora? Maybe. I don't know. See, I know the majority of Africans want unity. I know the majority of Africans want a better way of living. I know the majority of Africans aren't the coons that come to America and speak against foundational Black Americans, descendant of American slaves. I know that's not the truth. I know that majority. I've been to some of your countries. I understand. This is horrific. This is terrifying. But white supremacy don't give a fuck. White supremacy does not care. And Black Americans have been informing Black people in the diaspora about anti-Black hatred, anti-Black racism, anti-Black discrimination. Excuse me, family. Drico says they always show a Black man with a white woman and a Black woman with another Black woman. That's part of their agenda. That's social and sexual divide. So, family, I didn't want to be before you long. I just wanted to kind of showcase this because this has been on my mind for the last 48 hours about where's the disconnect between those in the African diaspora? Where's the disconnect between Black Americans, Caribbeans, and also those African countries? Where's the disconnect at? Why hasn't pan-Africanism taken off yet? We have so many great people that have come before us trying to join our nations around the world. Coming back from Ghana, when I went to Kwame Nkrumah's burial place, the place essentially needed to be renovated. It needed to be fixed up, so to speak. And they just let it decay. They just let it deteriorate. But during the year 2019, calling back Black people from the diaspora into Ghana, everything was popping. Everything was beautified. I don't know if it was a sham or not. But nonetheless, someone made a comment here stating that China already got their foot in Africa. When I was in Ghana, there was a lot of shocking things that I saw. And someone made a comment saying that I'm trying to paint Ghana worse than what it is. And I told that brother, I said, this is my perspective. This is what I saw. Majority of the jobs of building up the infrastructure, roads and buildings, is done by the Chinese. They allow the Africans, and key word, allow. They allow the Africans, the Ghanaians, to do the hard back-breaking work. I saw Ghanaians there stacking bricks while the Chinese men were using forklifts and in trucks. I was like, what the? And then I started to ask, my Ghanaian driver, I said, well, who's building the infrastructure? He said, China. I was like, okay, but why aren't Africans operating some of the equipment? Why they're not being trained? He said, the government. We was going down a road. It was partially finished. I said, oh, what do you think this road is going to be finished? He said, this road has been worked on for the past 5 years. And this road was only like 3 miles. He didn't say, he alluded to that the Ghanaian government squandered away the funds that was given to them by the World Bank, by the United Nations, and by other countries that was trying to improve the infrastructure. Of course, with some special interests like resources. You're going to get something. They're giving up something for that money. China absolutely has a foothold in a lot of African countries. And I understand because of colonization, you guys were prevented from learning a lot of the things that would improve your infrastructure and create the opportunities in business. And I've stated this before in some of my videos I called A Day in Ghana, where 99% of the businesses are owned by foreigners. And I'm not talking about your little mom and pop shops. I'm talking about malls, car dealerships, lawyer firms, hospitals are owned by non-citizens, by non-Ghanaians, people who do not look like Ghanaians. Lebanese, the Italians, the Chinese, and the Indians, to name a couple. So, family, I'm not here to hate on any African country. I'm here to provide context to the situation that's occurring in Ukraine and Poland and understanding the disconnect between us and the pan-Africanism movement and what really is not happening and how all of this could essentially been avoided some of the things that my wife and I saw, it was bringing her to tears. When we saw Ghanaians literally broad daylight on the side of the road, right there where a sidewalk should have been, just peeing, women and men alike. And I must say, the Ghanaian people are some of the nicest, most beautiful people I've ever encountered in my life. They're humble, they're meek. Now, when it comes to selling you something, they can be quite pushy, but I never felt threatened the whole entire time over there. I had a great time in Ghana, but I was totally disappointed in the infrastructure in Ghana. I thought that Ghana was some sort of African utopia. But of course, I went over there with my American eyes. And no, I was not expecting Wakanda, okay? I was not. But I can tell you from reading books, looking at videos, and actually seeing on ground. Now, granted, a lot of Ghana is built up. A lot of Ghana's infrastructure is built up. But there's a large portion that is decaying, that is deteriorating, that is not built up. When I looked at videos of Rwanda and I looked at their sewers and I looked at their streets, it was absolutely perfect. It was clean. When we was driving through the different towns and city, when we was in Ghana, there was trash everywhere. Trash everywhere. We saw cows and goats and chickens literally eating the trash. Plastic bottles, boxes, you name it. It was trash everywhere we went. We could not believe the amount of trash that we saw on every street, on every block, except where the majority of the foreigners live and where the majority of the government officials work and live. We didn't see trash. We saw that the sewers were clean. We saw that the sewers were covered up with cement. We didn't see trash on the side of the road. We saw beautification. We saw grass. We saw bushes. I'm just telling you what I experienced and what I saw. But family, if this pan-Africanism movement actually took off 50 or 60 years ago, I don't believe this will occur in the large numbers because there's thousands of African immigrants in Ukraine. Some other headlines here. African students struggle to make it out of Ukraine. Kenyan envoy to UN stuns the world, gives history lesson to Russia at Ukraine. What being a black man in Ukraine taught me about race relations. Fleeing African and Indian students face racism at the Ukraine border. That's another thing. What I've noticed, and I don't know if you guys have been following Indians in Ukraine. There's a lot of Indians in Ukraine because they travel to a lot of Western countries as well. But you know what Indians have that I have not seen of their immigrants in the Ukraine is that the Indian government called an emergency meeting and say, we need to provide safe passage for our people back to India. And the Indian government is providing damn near every resource to send planes to pick up their people and take them back to India. And believe it or not, India is an upcoming nation, but India is a poor nation as well. I believe that India is still considered a third world country, but they're providing each and every resource they have to extract their people out of a war-stricken country like the Ukraine. Now, I'm about to give you what one African told me on Clubhouse. Now, granted, I know he doesn't speak for the entire continent of Africa because I don't even recall what country he's from, but this is what he said. Someone was stating how the Ukraine was anti-black and racist and this, that, and the other, and why hasn't the African government called to the Ukrainian government and pleading and asking and providing safe passage for those Africans to come back to the continent? And the guy was speaking about white supremacy, this, that, and the other. And an African came off mic and he said, because they don't care. Why would he say that? Why would he say that African nations don't care about their people? I'm just asking the question. I don't know. I have no idea why he would say that. And that's from one person. Okay, that's just from one person. That's very, very anecdotal. And I just wanted to point that out because it made me think how I'm following how the Indian immigrants are getting out on planes. They told them within 100 days, roughly 3 months, that every Indian immigrant that is in the Ukraine and Poland will be extracted back to India. And that's what the Indian government is doing. Because personally, I know that Nigeria, if not the largest country in Africa, has the largest GDP. And you combine their GDP with Ghana's GDP and Senegal's GDP and the Congo's GDP and Kenya's GDP, you guys have enough money to extract your people back to the continent. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just a dumb Black American. Maybe I'm just so foreign and don't. Maybe I'm looking at this totally wrong. Maybe that. But I'm just stating what I've seen, what I experienced. Stock says, what are my thoughts on African leaders not really doing enough to help their citizens in Ukraine? Stock, as a born Nigerian, I think the government just don't care. We have issues back home and they're not caring. Now, that's a second African person that stated that. I'm not making this stuff up, family. But I'll leave you guys with this. Let's try this. Let's try this. If African immigrants are going to come to America, stop speaking against reparations. Stop speaking ill will to foundational Black Americans and stating that we're lazy and we don't need anything. Stop speaking down to us in our own country. If you're coming here for opportunities, if you're leaving your country, if you're fleeing your country, come here, make your money, take it back to the continent, whatever you're going to do. Because the same rhetoric that you speak in America, you know you can't speak that shit back in your country. See, when I went to Ghana, I went there for history, research, and a vacation. And no time when I was in Ghana did I ever speak ill about the government, about the people, about anything occurring in Ghana. I didn't speak down to it. Because first and foremost, I give big praise to the Ghanaian people. I had no idea how Ghanaians would be in their own country. You guys are some really beautiful and nice people. But when African immigrants, no matter what country you come from, we can't stop immigration. We've been trying to stop it for so long because the only thing Black Americans keep doing on large percentage of numbers is keep voting for Democrats. African immigrants will come over here and tell us about our government. They will tell us about our politics. They don't know anything about our history. They don't know anything about our struggle. They don't know anything about our fight. And then when we try to inform them, when we try to tell them, when we try to teach them about white supremacy, they don't listen because our government every now and again give you trinkets. They give you funding. They give you resources. They have you on this political kick to be Democrats so Democrats can stay in office. And I know a lot of talk has been coming up about Donald Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I'm not a Biden supporter. I did not vote for Biden. But I'll tell you this about Trump. And this is not in support of Trump. I'm just stating the fact. When Trump was in office, Trump did not make, create, or write any anti-Black policies, laws, bills, or legislation. He did not. But Joe Biden has. Donald Trump didn't give anyone federal protections under the law like he did Asians. Donald Trump did not allot $40 million to anyone while he was in office. If anything, while Donald Trump was in office, he kept Putin in check. He kept Vladimir Putin in check. We had no issues out of Russia. So we're 1 year in the Biden administration and all hell is breaking loose. See, the one thing that I could somewhat respect from Republicans and also with the Donald Trump administration is that when Black people, Black Americans say, hey, we want reparations, he said, no, we're not doing that. Oh, okay. But when we ask Democrats for reparations, resources, and support and funding like they do other groups, when we get to these, state primaries, we'll look at that again. You know what we're going to do? We're going to do HR 40. We're going to study slavery. We're going to look at some of the atrocities. Oh, like all the documentaries, all the stories, all the reports, all the journals, all the books that we have about. You sure that's not enough? No. We need legislation in order to look at this more closely to see if we're going to give you reparations or not. Benign neglect, time wasting. This is what the Democrats have done for a very long time. And see, I was talking to my wife's mom the other day. She didn't know that black people were Republicans prior to LBJ, prior to Lyndon B. Johnson. She didn't know that. We were Republicans prior to then. The only reason why we became Democrats, essentially, is because of the talks and some of the legislation that got passed when Martin Luther King went up to the White House and spoke with LBJ, and he passed some things. Even a racist president will still pass laws for people. Like, we got to get these goddamn black people out of our face. We got to do something. They marching in the street, protesting, looting. See, that's the one thing that a white supremacy government understands. When you start to destroy the infrastructure, when you start to destroy the wealth that they have created, unfortunately, that is when they start listening. Now, granted, all of the things that occurred during the Black Lives Matter movement wasn't even Black Americans. A lot of the destruction that occurred was Antifa, was non-Black people. Majority of it, not all, majority of it. What are we doing, people? I don't understand why people from another continent will come to a country and undermine the citizens that look like them, that try to inform them, that try to teach them. See, before a lot of Black Americans speak on any African country, we try to learn something about your history, about your government, your culture. We try to understand some of it. We just don't come in here blabbering our mouth and talking bullcrap about your people. That's not who we are. We're not some dumb, lazy ass people. That's not our lineage. That's not our culture. See, I used to be very divisive, or some people would say very straightforward, because what I used to say, if they're going to allow African immigrants into America, okay. If African immigrants want to come to America in the Western world because of opportunities and education and a bad way of living, okay. But while you're over here, shut your damn mouth. Stop speaking out against us. I had so much to say when I was in Ghana, but because of the respect of the people and what I may damage, and also damaging myself, because African governments don't like when you speak out publicly about their governments. They will come and get your ass. But see, in America, freedom of speech. But even freedom of speech has a price, because now the whole pan-African movement that I would have taken off anywhere 5 years ago, it's totally been eliminated, because now we have African immigrants and people of African descent in America. And the only thing that foundational Black Americans, descent of American slaves, the only thing we're doing now is having very divisive conversations. We were divided. Now it's obliterated. It's totally being wiped away between our very eyes. And I don't want to say whose fault it is. We already know. During the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm not trying to highlight Nigeria, but there was a Nigerian woman on Twitter, and she was marching in the Black Lives Matter movement and stopped with a sign saying, "Get your lazy Black asses and get a job." Family, I'm done here. It's bothersome to see people who are going through a situation like this in the Ukraine, not being afforded to use the transportation so they can evacuate to the neighboring country of Poland to seek safe refuge. The Ukrainians are stopping them from boarding buses and trains, and the Polish are stopping them from entering the country. And I just keep going back to this Pan-African movement that if it would have ever kicked off, I believe that this would have never occurred because they wouldn't even be in their countries. They'd be right there in Africa, building every African country up like a Wakanda. Stock says, I am for Black people getting reparation because the election rights hadn't helped yet. With the voting right, Black people were left out, and I support the Black community, and unity matters more. And last but not least, I will say this. There's a lot of African people from the continent that support foundational Black Americans. Not all the African immigrants that come here are coons. We have some riders, we have some soldiers, we have some warriors who back us. But unfortunately, the majority that we've seen that come over to America are coons and sambos for their white slave masters and their puppet masters. And they say and do anything for the little trinkets that they get and some sort of financial stability by the way of a check. And they speak out against our movements each and every chance that they get. Because we're still trying to deal with the coon class that operates within the foundational Black American family. We're still trying to deal with our own coons, let alone we have foreign coons coming over doing the same exact thing. See, at one point in time, we thought that African immigrants were going to come over here to reinforce us in fighting white supremacy, but the only thing they've been doing in large numbers is supporting the system of white supremacy. You guys have a good night.